What's up, folks, and welcome back to Dyce Reacts, where we are staying in Australia tonight. Oh yeah, we are going to be checking out the biggest lies, well, the 9 biggest lies about Australia people keep believing. Remember, side checks one out. We ain't going to waste no more time. We're just going to get right into it, folks. We're going to get right into it. Oh yeah.
If you're planning to come to Australia, whether it is to live or for a visit, in this video we're going to talk about the biggest misconceptions people have about Australia and Australians that are simply not true. So if you're interested, keep watching. The first misconception about Australians that people have is that all Australians know how to surf. As you may know, Australia has some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and with that, surfing and swimming are naturally very popular sports. And indeed, many Australians who live near the water or by the coast tend to be great surfers, or at least do it as a hobby. But this doesn't mean that everyone knows how to surf. In fact, research by Royal Lifesaving Australia reports that 1 in 4 adults in Australia are either weak swimmers or can't swim, so let alone surfing. So that's a massive misconception that many people have about Australians in general. And having said that, if you're coming to Australia for a visit and you don't know how to swim, I highly recommend taking some lessons if you want to get in the water. Otherwise, don't do it because it's very risky and tourist drownings are actually a thing in this country. Now, the second misconception I always hear about Australia, and so many people keep leaving comments about that and asking me about that, is that there are dangerous animals everywhere. Even snakes coming out of the toilet.
That's how I
and
thought.
while it is true that Australia is home to some of the most deadliest creatures in the world, it also has many unique and diverse wildlife that it's not necessarily dangerous unless you disturb them. So urban areas, that is cities, are generally safe, and it's very rare that you are actually going to come across an animal, a kangaroo or a koala or even a snake. It's very, very rare. You actually have to get out of your way to see wildlife, and it's very likely that if you're a tourist, you'll actually have to end up going to a reserve to try to see some wildlife, or perhaps if you go to a national park, you might spot some wallabies or kangaroos. Okay, another misconception.
Yes, this was definitely a misconception because in the last video I think I did with her, I thought the same thing. No, I don't think it's her, it was somebody else. I thought the same thing, that no matter where you go in Australia, it's just dangerous animals everywhere. Like it's almost like you're stepping in a minefield. That's how I thought. And I didn't know it was most people outside of Australia who thought that way, but I was definitely in this category. Well, until now, that is.
If you go to a national park, you might spot some wallabies or kangaroos. Okay, another misconception that many people have is that Australians use slang for absolutely everything and that you won't understand a thing of what they are saying. The reality is that at the beginning, perhaps if English is not your first language, you might struggle a bit with the Australian accent, and of course there are some slang words that you have to get familiar with in order to understand what they mean, right? So if someone says, oh, let's meet this arbo means afternoon. So it is true that there's some slang, but that doesn't mean that you'll come here and you won't be able to communicate. Not at all. But the reality, of course, again, is that if you're not an English native speaker, and perhaps like me, you were used to the American or the British accent, perhaps during the first few months or the first year, you may struggle a bit with the accent, but the good news is that Australians are super, super kind and they won't have any issues in helping you with that, yeah? And something else to know is that Australia is super multicultural. So you will get to hear many different accents from all over the world, so don't worry about it. Okay, another big misconception that many people have is that Australia has no culture. Everything is all about nice beaches. So basically tourists, they think that Australia, it's only a place where you go to the beach and that's it. But Australia is more than that. Cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane offer amazing cultural experiences and have world-class art galleries and museums featuring Australian, Indigenous and international art. The performing arts scene, music festivals and sporting events are also a very important part of the Australian culture and identity. So if you ever come to visit here, I highly recommend not limiting yourself to just going to the Great Barrier Reef, but actually exploring all the cultural activities Australia has to offer. It will be naturally very different to what you find, for example, in Europe, but again, it's another side of Australia that perhaps not many people know about. Another big misconception is that Australia is always hot, all year round.
Yes,
and
I
again,
fall
while
under
it
that
is true that
category.
Australia is known for its warm climate, the reality is that this is a huge country with a wide range of weather patterns. In the northern areas, for example, you'll definitely find a more tropical climate with wet and dry seasons, but in the southern regions, you'll experience cold winters and in some parts even snowfall. So it's not all hot and humid as many people think. We actually have a big...
Like I said, I fell into this category. Well, until now, that is, like I said, just thinking that everything is hot in Australia. Like everywhere you go, every corner of Australia is just hot and you can't escape the heat. That's how I thought. But she's making me see that that's just a misconception. So I'm learning.
of everything in that regard. So if you're a tourist coming to Melbourne or Sydney, remember please to bring a jacket, especially during the winter months or in autumn and spring, because it does get cold. Another misconception that people who've never been to Australia have is that all Australians live in the outback. And while it is true that Australia is famous for its outback, most Aussies actually live in urban or suburban areas. Cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth are huge cities with modern infrastructure and a wide range of landscapes, including rainforests, mountains, and coastal plains. So it's not all desert, as many people think. Another misconception, and this is more of a stereotype that many people have, is that Australians are all tall, white, blonde, and fit, and they all surf, as I said before. And this is something that we were discussing with my Australian partner. We were wondering, why do people always have that image? And even in Argentina, where I'm originally from, when there's some kind of reference to Australia, for some reason, they always portray Australians as these blonde surfers or safari guys, and that's far from the truth. Australia is a nation of migrants as well as people from Aboriginal heritage. It's super multicultural. You're going to find people from all over the world, and we all look very different. So it's a huge misconception to think that everyone looks like this guy. No, yeah, it's interesting. Okay, another very big misconception is that all Australians are descendants of convicts. Well, it is true that British convicts settled in Australia in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The majority of Aussies today are not direct descendants of convicts. Again, as I said before, Australia is a nation made of migrants, Aboriginal peoples, so it's not that all Australians are descendants of convicts, as many people think. Another big misconception that many people have is that Australians have Vegemite with every single meal, and this is not true. Well, it is true that Australians love their Vegemite, at least most Aussies that I know, they love it, and we actually have, even here, we have Vegemite. It's an essential part of our house. And that doesn't mean that Australians eat Vegemite with every single meal. Usually you have it as an afternoon snack or perhaps in the morning, but not every single day. So yeah, that's another misconception, I guess.
I definitely have to try that Vegemite because I know they love the Vegemite. I never thought that they use it for everything, but I know it's certainly something that they cherish. They really do appreciate a Vegemite. So this certainly I have to try. About the convict part, this is the first time I'm hearing that many people, there's a stereotype where people think that mostly all Australians are descendants from convict. I fell in 3 categories that she spoke about, and you can't blame me. It's what that was told to us for a long time, what we saw on television, so we just assume. Compared to other countries, when you think about the culture, you could get a distinct image of the culture, but for some reason I don't really get a clear image of Australian culture. When it comes to culture, I'm talking about more of an imagery of the culture. I'm not talking about activities that you do. I'm more referring to an image, like an apparel, a look, like a festival that is different from the norm that stands out. I can't think of anything Australian that really stands out in terms of an event that they have. Like, I don't know, I haven't seen it yet, but it could be the case why people think that Australia doesn't have like any kind of culture, because right now I'm just in hindsight, I'm trying to think of something that's distinctive in terms of a festivity where it's totally different from a Western standard point of view in terms of a culture, an activity, whether it's a yearly ceremonial event or whatnot. Is there something of that nature in Australia? I don't think I've done anything of that nature. So I can understand maybe that's why people don't really see as having a culture. Guys, gotta hit me up with some information about what I just said there. You could send me a link of something that is just unique to Australia, that an activity that only takes place there, that's just different from the rest of the world. Yes, I would like to see that, man. Hit me up in the comments, man, with some information about that. And you could send me some link, or you could just leave a type what you think I should check out pertaining to that. If you want to see that long term outro that I do, hit me over on Dyce Reacts, where I do music reactions. This is where I'm going to be making my exit. Until next time, peace out.